And we are recording. All right, let me go ahead and get presenting. Get this show on the road. All right, so here we go. Tonight's clinical educator webinar is all about edTPA. I'm going to talk to you guys all about helping candidates organize, and I'm going to give you some commentary tips. I'm also going to talk about video recording. This is Dr. Tom Fisher from the Office of School and Community Partnerships, and I'm sort of the go-to person for edTPA. All right, so here's the agenda. I'm going to talk to you about the due dates. And I do say dates because just in case there's some remediation, you see that as my last bullet down there, we might have to have multiple due dates. So we're going to talk about due dates, video recording help, that's task 2, task 1 commentary tips, task 2 and 3 commentary tips. I'll talk to you about the e-portfolio and helping make sure your candidate stays organized. And then I'll talk about what I meant by remediation. All right, so due dates. All candidates, regardless of program area, will be submitting their edTPA product to Pearson. Okay, that's where the official scoring is done. It's external and it's anonymous. And that's going to happen on Thursday, October the 10th. All right, and that's going to happen by 11:59 p.m. All right, so all candidates are going to have to submit it by Thursday, October the 10th. All right, so the reason for this is there's a 3-week turnaround, on getting those official scores back that we have to have for state licensure. So it takes 3 weeks to get them back, which means we won't have it back until October the 31st. At that point, we'll know who passed, who failed, and what we need to do in terms of remediation, which I'm going to talk about later. I do see that there's a bullet there that says questions, but what I'm going to do is ask everybody to refrain from questions until the end when I have my question slide. All right, so there's the due date, October 10th. All your candidates know it. All your candidates are in some sort of support seminar that's trying to keep them on pace for this. All right, let's talk about task 2 because this should be happening. If it's not happening this week, it should be happening over the next 2 weeks. We need your help. We need you to be the camera person. All right, we need you to be holding the camera, moving the camera around, following the candidate if they're walking around, talking to groups, stuff like that. We need you to make sure that you don't pause the recording because we need these to be continuous regardless of what's going on inside the classroom because the candidate is going to watch this recording later on and pull out their continuous clips that they're going to use. So we want to make sure that there's no pausing. All right, so we definitely want to make sure that the candidates are getting some help with this recording. We need multiple days of recording. All right, very important that we get multiple days of recording because if there is a possibility that they have to remediate, we don't want them to have to make an all new task 2 video. And if there is multiple days, then the students will have multiple options for video clips that they can use. So some things that you'd want to be on the lookout for is we want to record some whole group where, there's going to be some whole group where the teacher's giving directions, asking questions, small group where the students are working collaboratively on something where we can see, as you can see, I've got their student-to-student conversations. Of course, we want to see student-to-teacher conversations. We want to hear some higher-order thinking. We want to hear we want to see some of these high-leverage practices, eliciting student thinking and the group dynamic. All right, especially around whatever that standard in task 1 that the candidate is supposed to be teaching to over those 3 to 5 lessons. Remember, this video must come from those 3 to 5 lessons. Please remind your candidate, no editing. We need these clips to be continuous. Now, you're not going to be able to help them with the editing, or not the editing process, but excuse me, when they review the video, you're not going to be able to help them pick their clips, but you can certainly help them record their clips. You're not going to help them pick. You're not going to help them convert or compress. You're not going to help them trim down their videos. You're not going to do any of that, but you are definitely going to be helpful in actually recording the video. So that's a huge help that you can be for us right now. All right. Let's talk about weakest rubric scores, and then I'm going to tell you about some things that you can do to help us focus on these commentaries. So the candidates have to do a commentary after every single one of their tasks. So task 1, 2, and 3 for most programs. For LED folks, they'll have 4 tasks, so they'll have 4 commentaries they have to write. And these are some common areas that students are weak on that you, the clinical educator, are probably very strong in. So as you can see there, I have rubrics 2 and 3, and I'm not going to go into what those rubrics are, but I can tell you that what those rubrics deal with is prior knowledge that the students have, prior knowledge and skills, and also what we call assets. So what is relevant and connects with the students? Now, nobody knows the students in the classroom better than you, the classroom teacher. So it'll be very helpful, not for you to help them write the commentary, but for you to give them tips about how they can connect with your students. All right, this is going to be very helpful as they're writing these after the fact commentaries, right? So help them. What is the prior knowledge? What are the things that are relevant and help connect with the students, whether it's personal, whether it's community or cultural things that you know, developmental needs that the students have, of course, IEP, 504 or ELL needs. These are things that you, the classroom teacher, already know about your students, and our student teachers have to write about this stuff, and they need to get this information from you. All right, some other rubrics that are weak, rubrics 10 and 15. Those also deal with tasks 2 and 3, and what this is reflection. So this is where the candidate is going to reflect on their video in task 2, and they also reflect on their ability to assess in task 3, where they're collecting work from the students, doing a data analysis, and talking about giving feedback and next steps. So here we need you to, you're going to be giving them feedback weekly with the OFF. So this is something to talk to them about, you know, having them reflect. When you have conversations about these OFFs, this is really going to help them, push them to reflect and talk about real change that they would make. And when I say real change, I'm thinking about the content and the activities, not necessarily process change like giving more wait time or having students turn and talk. Those are good things, and we do want to hear them talk about those things in their commentaries, but we also want to hear them talk about real changes, certain graphic organizers that they could have used, certain research-supported activities that they could have used or approaches they could have used that you know about. All right, so try to deliver some feedback in your OFF around that, and please kind of force them to reflect and talk to them about what they're doing on a daily basis that they could improve upon. All right, because they're going to have to write about these areas. All right, the e-portfolio system. I definitely want to talk about this. So the e-portfolio system, all the students you know are going to submit this. It's going to be externally scored through Pearson. So Pearson handles this. So edTPA, all the products go to Pearson, and Pearson has the trained scorers that were trained by scale. So for instance, I went to the scorer training, and so I know what the e-portfolio system looked like. Now, there are a lot of files that go into this e-portfolio, and they are very, very specific types that they have to have, and sizes, page limits, merging of files together. So we do have video resources for the students to watch on these. For instance, in my middle secondary group that I supervise, they do have a video that tells them all about the file organization and how it's supposed to look. We need them organizing their work now because there are so many files, and when you get to the point where you have to submit this work, they're only going to have about a week of access to this e-portfolio to get all of their work in. And like I said, it is going to be several files that come from different places, so it's good for the candidates to start organizing by task their work right now, put it on a flash drive, put it on their Google Drive, make sure they're backing it up. All right, we definitely need them to back up all their work because when it comes time to submit, it needs to be very organized. Additionally, if they have to remediate, and like I said, we're going to get to that slide, if they have to remediate, if something goes wrong with their product, they do not get their original product back from Pearson, which means they had better have a copy of everything that they submitted because they do not get their original back, whether they pass, fail, or have some sort of incomplete issues that they have to deal with. All right, so like I said, they only get 1 week to organize this stuff in that system, so it's a really good idea for them to be organized right now. So please encourage them to be organized by task immediately. All right, so here's a little bit more about that organization. The ePortfolio has a great setting that does not allow them to mistakenly upload a partial product. They have to view all of their files before they can submit. So they can't possibly mistakenly upload the wrong file or a blank file or submit a partial portfolio. So that's impossible for them to do that. All right. So what we need for them to do, back to what I said, is we need them to be organized, and there are very, very specific names for the different files. They are getting help with that in their support, but we've seen candidates in the past, not take advantage of that, and when they get to the end, they're scrambling and they're trying to get all these things together, and, quite honestly, it could affect your classroom when they're not organized like this. They're with you on a daily basis. You're checking in with them. They're doing this edTPA process, this week, next week, maybe the week after. So what I would do is definitely check in with them and make sure that you see that they are organizing these materials. It will definitely ease their stress at the end, and it'll probably ease your stress because if they are freaking out with a couple of days left to go on an edTPA, it could quite possibly affect what's going on in your classroom. All right, so we don't want the instruction in your classroom to falter because of edTPA. So again, we need them to be proactive. All right, let's talk about, just so you can see what I'm talking about here, and you can ask to see these things. You're not giving any feedback or anything like that. You're not editing any of this work. But task 1, look at how many files there are. There's something called a context for learning. That's a template that's provided to the candidate. Part B is their lesson plans, okay, 3 to 5. They have to have 3 to 5 lesson plans, and when they send them, they have to be merged as one file. So for instance, I have student teachers that are submitting to me 1 lesson plan at a time, and that's fine. But when it goes to edTPA, it all has to be one merged together file. Part C is their instructional materials. This is any sort of handouts that they give to the students. Again, this has to be one merged together file. This could be as many as 25 pages of materials that the students send. Okay, so you can see how important it is for them to know where these files are that they want to send to back up what they're saying about their lesson planning. Part D, assessments. Again, same thing. These are going to be all merged together. So if they're doing warm-ups and exit tickets and quizzes and they have documents, all of these blank assessments, not the ones that the students have done, but the blank ones that they planned, this doesn't even have a page limit. All right, there is no page limit on the number of assessments that you can submit, but they do have to be one dedicated file again. And then the final thing, part E, is their commentary. Again, this is a template that's provided for them. They know where to get this on the edTPA resources page, and it has to be completely filled out. If they don't answer a prompt question, all the prompts are connected to a rubric. So if they don't answer a prompt, then they're going to get an incomplete for that rubric. And if they have 2 incomplete rubrics, they fail. All right, 2 incomplete rubrics equals fail. So we want to make sure that they have this organized, filled out, completed, and these are things that you can see that you're not giving feedback on, that you're just checking that they're organized and done. All right, so here's some commentary one tips. So commentary one is supposed to be written in future tense. So it's supposed to be something that they're justifying the plans that they've written based on what they know about the standards and objectives, what they know about the students' knowledge and skills coming into the class, what they know about those assets, things that that make it relevant and connect with the kids, and then of course any sort of accommodations and modifications. So they are justifying here in this commentary. They're not writing this thing after the fact. Now, will some of them go back and write this after the fact or edit it after the fact? Of course they will. Of course they will. However, we want them to start it in future tense so that they are not impacted by whether or not the lessons go well or the lessons go great, because that'll impact how they answer the prompt questions. Very, very important. They should not be using any negative language in the prompts. All right, they can't use what's called deficit language. They shouldn't make excuses. They shouldn't talk about the students being at a low level or something like that. They can talk about students not being at grade level, but they shouldn't talk about, I'm planning this because my students are lower, level students. We don't want to see any sort of deficit language or making excuses. Now, you cannot read their commentaries. Most of them will have a peer that will be checking their commentaries. All right, so know that you can check with them and see if they have a peer doing that, and if they don't, you should highly suggest that they find a peer that they can do a peer check with. All right, so there's some task one commentary tips. All right, here's the task two files, a little bit smaller, and of course I say if necessary. Some programs, and this is based on the student teacher's handbook, so they better know this, some can turn in one video clip while others have to turn in 2 video clips. All right, so there's either 1 or 2 video clips, and that is based on their program handbook. So they should know that. And then, of course, they have an instruction commentary. Once again, it's a template that's provided by Pearson and Scale, and they just answer the questions. And again, it's by rubric. The files, they have to be 500 megabytes or less. We do run some support with technology. There are videos out there that they can watch that help them in terms of compressing and shrinking those files and converting those files. So you shouldn't have to worry about that, but you should be checking up and making sure that they know how many clips they're supposed to have and how long the clips should be and what should be in the clips, because the handbook is very clear on that, whether it needs to be whole group, small group, one-on-one. It will tell you if it needs to be 10 minutes or 15 minutes. It tells you if it needs to be 1 clip or 2. There shouldn't be any mystery around this. The candidates have it in the handbook, and they can absolutely show you this information. All right, task 3 files. Part A, it's going to be the student work samples. All right, so for most programs, that's going to be 3. For special education, that's only going to be 1 student. All right, part B is sort of an optional file, which is feedback to students. I say optional because many of the students write their feedback many of the student teachers write their feedback directly onto the student work samples. So if they wrote that directly onto the student work samples, they wouldn't have to have an additional feedback file. All right, so that's optional for those who don't write directly on the work. There's an assessment commentary. Again, this is a prompt that's provided for them. Again, it's based on the rubrics. And then there's something called an evaluation criteria. This always catches up a lot of students, and they're like, what is that? What is that? What's the evaluation criteria? And I always say, it is what it sounds like. You gave an assessment. What are you basing the student's grade on? So the evaluation criteria is literally the rubric or answer key that the student teacher used to grade the students in the classroom. All right, so those are what the task 3 files look like. So like I said, ton of files here that the student teacher's got to be prepared to organize, name these properly, and get ready to upload. All right, some task 2 and 3 commentary tips. Task 2, that's the instruction video. Task 3, that's the assessment. That's going to be those work samples from the students in your classroom. Both of these commentaries, like I mentioned before, are reflective in nature compared to the task 1 being before. All right, the reflection, it's about real change. I talked about that. We want to make sure that we're not just talking about process change, that we're talking about real content activity change. Same thing for assessment. We don't want just process change here. We want to know what kind of changes they're going to make to the quality of the assessments that they're writing, and of course maybe even the rubrics that they're using. All right, that's always helpful stuff. This is also a place where they can apply some research and theory. So you should ask them about applicable research and theory that could go along with some of their assessments or some of their activities. All right. I don't know why that slide got out of order there. So LED folks, if you're watching this or listening to this, of course, there are task 4 files, and this is only for LED candidates. And again, look at the number of files that the candidates are supposed to turn in. Now you can see why I'm stressing this idea of organization. All right. There's a math context for learning, template provided. An overview of lesson, again, template provided. The math assessment and the evaluation criteria, which would be that rubric or answer key, that's going to be something created by the candidate. Math work samples and re-engagement samples, those are going to be the students in your class. All right, so they've got to provide samples of those. And then there's a commentary, which again has some questions that the student teachers have to answer, and that template is again provided. So you can see the LED students have quite a few files that they have to keep organized. All right, what happens if they don't pass? So I said at the beginning, of course, this is the first year. This is the first semester that across the state, anybody that's in a teacher preparation program, doesn't matter if they're a residency candidate, which is used to be called lateral entry, doesn't matter what program they're in, from birth to kindergarten to the arts. It doesn't matter what you're in. You have to take edTPA, and you have to pass it in order to get a license. For most programs, it's a score of 38. That's for 15 rubrics. For LED, they have 18 rubrics, and a passing score would be a 45. So as mentioned, 10/10, October 10th, that's the deadline to turn it in. We will have the scores on the 31st of October, so 3 weeks later, we'll know, and there's a team that will be looking at the students that did not pass, and the next day we will reach out to them and start this remediation process. So what does that look like, and how can you help with this? Well, like I said, they're going to be contacted the very next day, which is Friday, November 1st. There's going to be a mentor person, somebody like me, that's going to help these candidates. And what we're going to do is we're going to analyze the results from each task, and what we're going to do is help them determine which task they might need to resubmit. They will have to resubmit it by the 21st of November. So they'll have to resubmit it by the 21st of November. If you do the 3 weeks on that, you can see that we would have their remediation scores back in time for commencement, graduation, final grades. All right? So they're going to have at least 2 times before commencement and a 3rd time, if necessary, this semester to work on passing edTPA. We want to knock it out the first time, but just in case, we have to have a plan. So one of the great things that you can remind them to make sure that they're doing a good job on this is the cost of edTPA. The original $300 that it costs to submit edTPA is paid for by UNC Charlotte. So UNC Charlotte picks up the tab on the original submission. Anything submitted by a candidate after that, so any resubmission that has to happen, is $100 per task, up to $300. So LEDs, if they had to resubmit the whole thing over again, they don't have to pay $400. They only pay $300. But the student teachers will now incur that cost of resubmitting their work. So that is a great motivational tool to make sure that they do well on this and that they have this well organized and they don't get incompletes. All right, that is a great incentive that they don't have to pay for it right now, but if something happens, they do. Last thing on the remediation and how you can be of help. If there are issues with task 2 or 3, task 2 being the video, that means a new video. Task 3 is the student work samples. That means new student work samples. The results come 3 weeks after the fact. Candidates cannot go back and re-record or give a new assessment to their students. All right? So therefore, we need some backup work. So that's why I said at the beginning we should take as much video as possible and also have multiple student assessments within those 3 to 5 days so that if a student teacher has to remediate, then they do have those materials that they can possibly use for resubmission, because they are not going to record a video that deals with a lesson that they did 3 weeks prior, okay? Because they would have to resubmit those lesson plans, and they're not going to get credit for that, all right? So we don't want any issues around that, and we don't want students to have to recreate the whole product if they don't need to, all right? So like I said, don't worry. We have a plan in place for remediation. I've already actually personally tested it out, and I know that it works with a student teacher this past semester. So we do have a plan in place. We know it will work. But we also have very good plans to make sure that they pass it the first time around. All right, so what are some next steps? I said at the top, most likely recording is happening this week or next. At the latest, the week of 9/23. I say that because the week of 9/23 only puts them about 2 weeks out, and there's a lot of organization and there's a lot of commentary writing that will have to be done in a very short period of time. So if they're recording that late, then they better be really organized, and they should certainly have done their task 1 commentary. They should be organizing all those task 1 materials. Again, they should be starting on that commentary. It's supposed to be in future tense. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. They can go back and work and edit it as they choose. All right? But this is the kind of stuff that they should be doing right now if you're checking with them. So questions and issues that they might have, they can reach out to me. I'll be happy to help. There's my email address. All right? Make sure that they're reaching out to T.E. Fisher. I am Tom Fisher, but don't ever have them search for Tom Fisher, because there's a student that still has that. I can't use that as an alias, and therefore that Tom Fisher has gotten a lot of emails for me, intended for me, and he doesn't respond. So it makes me look bad. So make sure that they have the right email address for Thomas Fisher, TEFisher@uncc.edu. And of course, in a lot of the materials that we give students, my email address is on there, so they know how to get in touch with me. So all of these students have specific support people for this edTPA process. There's lots of resources for them, but you are one of the greatest resources because you're right there with them every day, and you can be pumping them up and telling them what a great job they're doing and giving them the kind of feedback that's going to help in this process, getting them to reflect, helping them shoot these videos, all right, keeping them organized. That is probably some of the best help that we can get, all right, because we can't be out there in the classroom with them every day. So at this point, we have reached the end of what I need to do, all right? So now it's time for questions, all right? So now it's time for some questions if you have them, all right? So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to go to the chat box. All right. All right, send me any questions that you might have. All right, send me any questions that you might have. You can use the chat option. Any questions? Any questions? If the videos that the students take do not load or are poor quality, will they have the chance to redo the videos? Good question. So they definitely, that was one of the reasons why they should be testing out their equipment just to make sure that their equipment works properly. What I would say is if they send a video, and they do have to, I did mention that they have to preview all of their materials before they can send it. So they really shouldn't send a video that has poor audio quality. The video is one thing. The video doesn't have to be great, but the audio should be clear. We need to hear what the student teacher is saying. If we don't hear the students, that's expected. You can do a transcript of what students are saying, but the student teaching candidate should come through loud and clear. If they do not, they should not use that video. And that's why we want them to test the equipment. Let's say they just decide to send that video anyway. They're most likely going to get it incomplete. And, then they would have to find some other video then to send. Okay, they'd have to find another video to send. And if they do have to resend anything, again, like I mentioned, that's on them. It's going to be $100 per task. And the Pearson portfolio system is set up so that you don't send incorrect files. They make you look at all of your files to make sure that they can be read. Because once you open them in the Pearson system, that's exactly how the person from Pearson will see it. So for instance, somebody like a scorer like me, if I'm opening up the file and if they send a messed up video, then I open it up, it's messed up. It's not getting messed up in between them uploading it and me getting it. All right, so hopefully that made sense. So it says, so we really shouldn't be reading their edTPA things, just checking in with them to make sure they're on task and have it organized. Yes, so of course, there was a document that's on the OSCP website that talks about supporting your candidate on edTPA. And you could give them all sorts of activities, all sorts of assessment. You're giving them daily feedback. What you cannot do is the commentaries. You can't read the commentaries and critique that because that has to come from them. That's their justification. Now, were you helping them build the activities and assessment that went in? Absolutely. Nobody believes that student teachers, or any teacher for that matter, creates everything that they do from scratch. So that's not even possible, and nobody believes that. So if you were giving them stuff to use and giving them feedback on those things, that's fine. You cannot read the formal commentaries that they write about themselves, and you cannot help them decide what video they're going to send. That's what they've learned in their courses. This is them now looking at and determining what they did well and what they didn't do well, and how they need to go forward and fix it. Those are the things that they're learning. They don't have to be masters of this. All right, this is not mastery. This is just recognition. All right, this is just recognition of what it takes to be an effective teacher. It's not about being a master teacher. So hopefully that made sense. Okay. So how much assistance, so the next question I see is, how much assistance should we provide with their choice of activity to use with the recorded task? Level of guidance, support, what should our response be if they have no idea of what they want to do? What I would do, the easiest thing, and this is what I do with my candidates, is I go over, and I just did this with the middle secondary whole group candidates, and we looked at somebody else's video. And we talked about the rubrics and what do the rubrics say should be in there. So it's helpful, and you can look at the rubrics with your candidate, and there's the chance to ask those questions about asking them, well, what do you think you should do? Instead of them saying, hey, what should I do? You should sit down with them with the rubrics and see what the rubric says that they should do to get a level 3. All right, so every task has 5 rubrics, and they're very, very well written. And, the best thing to do is look at right in the middle, what is required for a 3, because 3 is proficiency. And that's what we did in my support seminar the other night. We looked at what each individual rubric said for task 2, the video. We watched a video of a prior student teacher, and the student teachers this semester tried to figure out what those student teachers that came before them did well or needed to work on. And so when we identified what that was, then the student teachers now have a better understanding of what they're supposed to do. All right, so a good way to have this conversation with them is to start with those rubrics for the task 2 video, because they are very specific about what they want to see, whether it's an essential literacy strategy or a complex text or multiple source primary documents. These are just some of the things that edTPA is looking for, and they actually say that in the rubric, that's what they're looking to see. All right, so the student shouldn't be confused by that. All right, good questions, though, great questions. All right, other questions? Other questions? Like I said, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I can usually answer almost any question as it relates to this product in general in terms of the organization and what the students are supposed to be turning in. I'm no expert on LED or special ed or anything like that. I handle the middle secondary folks, but certainly reach out to me, because if I don't know the answer, I know somebody that does. All right, well, that did it for this week's webinar on edTPA support and how you can do that in your classroom with your candidate. I hope that you got something out of this. I hope that this was informative and that you got some good ideas about how you can support your candidates going forward in the next couple weeks, because they definitely need you. Remember, all of us, including me, doesn't matter how much I know about edTPA, I didn't have to do it to get my license. And my guess is nobody out there listening tonight or watching this later on had to go through edTPA in order to get their license. So our candidates, they need your support. They need your help in ethical ways. They need your help and support. So let's make sure we support them, because I know there's a lot of great candidates out there, and we certainly don't want them to get tripped up by this new state requirement. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in, and I'm going to shut it down. Have a great night. Have a great weekend.